If you have to use complex words or concepts, don't dumb it down. It is what it is. If it's something that's complex, it's complex. You can't help that. But what you do have to do is define them in terms that your audience will understand. Okay? So if you have to make more than one sentence to explain it, that's fine. Be clear and keep it professional. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to try. So I'm a person who's Joe Schmo, and I've just been diagnosed with full-blown AIDS. How would you explain to me what AIDS is? If I have no idea what it is.
It's a disease that attacks your immune system, which is a system of your body that keeps you from getting sick. So it's a lot easier for you to get sick, and if you do get sick, it's usually more harmful than if you were a healthy person.
Okay? So what you said there is a disease that attacks my immune system, right?
Yes.
So just like lupus, so is AIDS similar to lupus? Lupus also attacks your immune system.
No.
What makes it different?
Sexually transmitted.
It's sexually transmitted. What else?
Doesn't AIDS affect the health of T cells? Or something
Okay.
like that?
Right? It's something that AIDS does that lupus doesn't do. That's different from any other disease I may have or may think of. Anyone else?
It's a retrovirus that's constantly changing.
Okay, it's constantly changing. So you see that I may not understand what it is, but if you explain it very simple, I'm going to think, oh, okay, well, that's fine. That's kind of similar to something else I know about. You have to be specific. And you have to be clear. You have to include all the information to put across your point in the way that the audience will understand. Okay? Okay. So, the use of jargon. So jargon, we already explained, is the language or words that you use within a group or organization or a profession. So if you have to use jargon, and sometimes when you're looking at these journal articles, they will use jargon, you have to explain it first. Most times jargon is used in the form of abbreviations. So all you have to do is just explain what abbreviation is, and then you can use abbreviation thereon after. Okay? For the purpose of our class, don't use jargon. Just explain it. Just keep it simple. Okay? And the reason we don't use jargon is because it can be misleading or confusing, especially if you don't explain it first. You can kind of lose your audience in your writing. Okay. Descriptions. So in science, there's a lot of complex ideas that you have to explain, and you have to be descriptive. You have to explain what these things are. You have to be accurate, you have to be concise at the same time, and you have to make sure that your point is given across. Okay? You can use analogies, but be very careful with analogies. You can kind of bring it home so that someone can understand it, but don't oversimplify the analogy. Any questions? Anyone? All right, so illustrations. Sometimes I don't expect you guys to do it for tonight's homework with illustrations, but in the future, in college, when you're writing your papers, you may have to use illustrations to describe your point, and that's totally fine. But you have to use the appropriate illustration for the appropriate topic. Okay, so I have an example here. If I said, a kidney primarily filters blood in the glomerulus portion of the nephron, and I gave you this picture, would you be able to understand that sentence? Is it giving any kind of description to what I'm trying to convey? Okay. So what if I gave you this picture, and I said the same thing?
Much better.
Much better? Why is it much better?
You can see the glomerulus and see the nephron, see exactly how it works.
You can see the blood in, you can see the blood out. So this is a good example. Some people will just try to put a picture that'll be pretty. No, you can't do that in scientific writing. You don't care how pretty it is. You have to actually use a picture that's appropriate for what you're trying to convey. Okay? Like I said, I don't expect you guys to use pictures in this class, but in the future, in your 4 years here at Emory, you may have to, and it's all about using the most appropriate picture, okay? All right, so ensure accuracy and select your words carefully. Do not confuse the audience. So if I said that cholera is a disease that affects your digestive tract, do you have a good idea what cholera is? Do you think that that one sentence gives you a good idea?
No.
Anyone know what cholera is, by the way? Anyone heard of cholera? Okay, so cholera pretty much is a disease that you get from drinking like tainted water, and it pretty much gives you really, really bad diarrhea to the point that you die within 24 hours. So cholera is not just a disease that affects the digestive tract. Stomach virus is something that affects your digestive tract, or gas is something that affects your digestive tract. But cholera is not one of those things, okay? So this is what I mean by be descriptive. It's not pretty to say diarrhea, but that's what cholera is. That's what's unique to cholera. Just like with AIDS, it's not pretty to say sexually transmitted disease, but that's what it is, okay? You have to be descriptive. All right, and a vaccine is given by needle. Does that give you any clue to what vaccine is?
No.
No, not really. So it's a tattoo. So it's a piercing. Is that different from vaccine? Yes, very different. So you have to be very descriptive, okay? Yes.
How can we be descriptive and yet concise?
Perfect.
The $64,000 question.
You, as the writer, have to decide what's the main point, okay? I think everything kind of goes back to what's the main idea I want to convey here. So if, in a cholera example, if you just want, if the main point is it gives you diarrhea, you don't have to go into the specifics of exactly what receptor in the body it affects. You just have to give the main idea points. Is that clear? Anyone else have a question? Do you have a question? Okay. So, good question. How do you be concise and descriptive? Only give the information that you need to convey the main idea. When you go back and you read your papers, or you read the paper that you're going to summarize, you're going to find a lot of interesting information. You're going to find a lot of descriptive information. Ask yourself what the main idea is, and only include information that's about the main idea. Questions? Good question.
Guys, this is difficult to do. It's difficult for professors to do it well, and their livelihood depends on being able to write properly in scientific writing. So keep that in mind. It is an ongoing process that you will be learning for years to come.
Okay, using the first person. I would just say don't do it. Just don't. It becomes harder when you're talking about lab reports. But in order to put your best foot forward, just put in your mind that it's forbidden. Okay? Sometimes you just probably can't find a different way to do it, but it should be like almost like a life-changing thing if you do.
Mm-hmm.
You should be so avoided that you feel like you committed a sin by doing it. Is that clear to everybody? Don't put yourself in the paper. It's not about you. It's not about what you've done. It's about the science and the information. Take yourself out of it as much as you can. Don't do it. Does everyone know what I mean by the first person? No? What's the first person? Just so that we're all clear.
We.
I, me, us, no. It's a thing. Okay? Alright, so these are little things that make a big difference. It's like the little small things that kind of get on the professor's nerves if they read it. It's kind of like those things, like nitpicky things that they will deduct, but they don't tell you why, or they don't tell you, you know, that it's against the rules, but they will take off for it. So, for numbers, if the number can be written in 2 words or less, write it out. Okay? For example, 200, 1, 500, for something like 598, that's 1 and 2 words, you would write out the number. Okay, is that clear? So some professors have their own preference for that. As like a steadfast, like a accepted rule, do this. If they say something different, then do what they say. But this is the rule, okay? A lot of students get confused when they do lab reports and they have to write a number first to start a sentence. Try not to.
Never.
If you absolutely have to, then just write it out. Like not 500, but actually write out 5 F-I-E. Okay? That. There are exceptions to this rule. Negative numbers, decimals, measurements, page numbers, percentages, and currency. You write those out as is. Okay? So here's an example here. What's easier for you to read? 55 milliliters per kilogram per hour, or actually read this as 55 milliliters per kilogram per hour? What's easier? The first one or the second one? The first one. And that's exactly how you will write it out. So measurements, you want to write it. And please never do this where you write 5 hours. I don't know why it's one of those things, because it's one of those things that's like, oh, we could just put 5 HR. You know, just don't do it. Any questions about that? I know it sounds really small and really like it doesn't matter, but it does matter.
And so you said if we were writing and we had to write 5 hours, you'd rather us write.
The number 5 HR.
Okay.
I know it sounds informal, but that's how we do it in science. It's one of those things. Unless you're starting out a sentence with the number 5 or 5 hours, try to not start out a sentence with that. And if you have to, just write out FIVE hours. Only if you have to. Like one of those sentences where if you do it, you feel like you committed something really bad. Okay? Any questions? All right, pronouns. Oh my gosh. So guys, this is another thing. You cannot use pronouns. I'm not gonna say never ever, but it's one of those things that if you really have to, you feel bad about it.
I'll say it. Never ever use